In the vast darkness between stars, where ancient civilizations measured their existence in eons and lesser species flicker like dying embers, humanity was supposed to be nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. We were the newcomers, the primitives who had barely learned to crawl beyond our own solar system when we encountered beings who had been shaping reality itself for millions of years. The Vortak Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds before Earth's first cities were even built. Their blood magic had torn apart entire star systems, their immortal warriors had never known defeat, and their hunger for the life essence of other species was as endless as the void itself. When they set their crimson eyes upon humanity, it should have been just another routine harvest, another species to drain dry and cast aside. But, sometimes, the universe has a sense of irony. Sometimes, the predator discovers that what they thought was prey has teeth of its own. This is the story of Marcus Chen, an ordinary human who found himself face to face with Lord Kazeth, one of the most feared blood drinkers in the galaxy. It's the story of a promise made in malice that became something else entirely. And it's the story of how humanity's greatest weakness became our most devastating strength. Because when an immortal being promises to take your blood, and you smile as you place your hand upon them, well, that's when things get interesting. What follows is an account recovered from the personal logs of Marcus Chen, translated from the original human languages and cross-referenced with Vortak Empire records. The authenticity has been verified by the Galactic Historical Preservation Society, though many still refuse to believe what these records contain. As you read this, remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't technology, magic, or overwhelming force. Sometimes, it's simply refusing to be afraid. Marcus Chen had always been told he was unremarkable. Average height, brown hair that refused to stay in place, and the kind of face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting him. His job as a xenobiology researcher aboard the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge suited him perfectly. He could spend hours studying alien microorganisms without anyone expecting him to be particularly social or memorable. That all changed the day the Vortak found them. The attack came without warning. One moment Marcus was analyzing soil samples from the fourth planet in the Kepler 442 system, and, the next, the ship's emergency klaxons were screaming through the corridors. Red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow as the crew scrambled to battle stations they'd never expected to use. "All hands, this is Captain Morrison," the announcement crackled through the ship's communication system. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Repeat, we are under attack. All non-essential personnel report to emergency shelters immediately." Marcus dropped his sample container, watching weeks of work shatter across the laboratory floor. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see them, ships that defied every principle of physics he understood. They moved like living things, their dark hulls pulsing with veins of crimson light. They didn't fly so much as swim through space, leaving trails of what looked disturbingly like blood in the vacuum behind them. The Horizon's Edge shuddered as something impacted the hull. The lights flickered, and Marcus felt his stomach drop as the artificial gravity fluctuated. He grabbed onto the nearest workstation as another impact sent equipment tumbling across the room. "Hull breach in Section 7, came another announcement. Emergency bulkheads are sealed. Boarding parties detected." Boarding parties. The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. He'd read the reports from the outer colonies, the scattered fragments of information that had reached Earth about things in the dark between stars. Species that didn't just conquer worlds, they harvested them. Drained them. Left nothing behind but empty husks drifting in space. Marcus ran toward the emergency shelter, his footsteps echoing in corridors that suddenly felt too quiet. The Horizon's Edge had been humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, equipped with experimental faster-than-light drives and enough scientific equipment to establish a permanent research base. Now it felt like a tomb. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Dr. Sarah Voss, the ship's chief xenobiologist and his immediate supervisor. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, and there was a wild look in her blue eyes. "Marcus, thank God," she gasped. "We need to get to the shelter. The bridge has gone silent," and I think she stopped mid-sentence, staring over his shoulder. Marcus turned, and his heart stopped. The creature standing at the end of the corridor couldn't possibly be real. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its face was almost human, beautiful even, but The beauty was wrong somehow, too perfect, too symmetrical, like a mask carved from marble. Long silver hair flowed down its back, and, when it smiled, Marcus could see fangs that gleamed like polished ivory. But it was the eyes that made Marcus's knees go weak. They were the color of fresh blood, and they seemed to look right through him, as if his skin and bones were transparent. "How delightful," the creature said, its voice carrying an accent Marcus couldn't place. It sounded cultured, educated, like someone who'd had centuries to perfect their diction. "More specimens to examine." Dr. Voss took a step backward, pulling Marcus with her. "Run," she whispered. The creature laughed, a sound like crystal bells in a cemetery. "Oh, please do try. It's been so long since I've had a proper hunt." That's when Marcus noticed the others. They emerged from shadows that shouldn't have existed under the ship's bright lighting, pale figures in dark armor that seemed to drink in light. They moved with fluid grace, like dancers or predators, and each one carried weapons that hummed with energy. "I am Lord Kazeth of the Vortak Empire," the tall creature announced, spreading his arms wide as if welcoming them to a party. "And you, dear little creatures, are about to contribute to something much greater than your small lives could ever achieve." Dr. Voss grabbed Marcus's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "The emergency pods," she whispered urgently. "If we can reach no," Lord Kazeth interrupted, apparently having heard her despite the distance and her low tone. "I'm afraid your journey ends here. But, please, don't look so frightened. What we do is quite natural, really. Your species consumes other living things for sustenance, does it not? We simply have more refined tastes." Marcus felt his legs moving without conscious thought, backing away down the corridor. But, everywhere he looked, more of the pale figures appeared. They weren't just on this deck, they were throughout the entire ship. The horizon's edge hadn't been attacked, it had been taken. "The blood of a terrified creature is so much more potent," Lord Kazeth continued conversationally as he began walking toward them. Each step was perfectly measured, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. The fear, the adrenaline, the desperate hope for survival, it all adds such wonderful flavor. "What do you want from us?" Dr. Voss demanded, trying to keep her voice steady and failing completely. Lord Kazeth paused, tilting his head as if considering the question. "Want? My dear, you misunderstand. This isn't about wanting. This is about necessity. Your species has achieved faster than light travel, which means you've reached the point where you might actually become troublesome if left to develop. Better to harvest you now, while you're still manageable." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "Harvest? Oh yes," Lord Kazeth's smile widened. "We'll take the best specimens for study, of course. Learn how your biology works, understand your technological capabilities, catalog your genetic material. But, most of you will simply be drained. Your life essence will fuel our ships, power our magic, sustain our immortal forms. In a way, you should be honored, you'll become part of something eternal." Dr. Voss made a sound that was part sob, part laugh. "You're talking about genocide." "Such a harsh word," Lord Kazeth replied. "I prefer to think of it as evolution in action. The strong consume the weak. We have ruled this galaxy for over 2 million years, little creature. We have seen species rise and fall like waves on a beach. Your kind is nothing special." That's when something strange happened. Marcus felt the fear that had been paralyzing him slowly transform into something else. Not courage, he wasn't brave enough for that. But a kind of stubborn irritation, the same feeling he got when someone interrupted his research or dismissed his work without understanding it. "Nothing special," he repeated, taking a step forward. Dr. Voss grabbed his arm. "Marcus, what are you doing?" He shook her off gently, his eyes locked on Lord Kazeth. The Vortak Lord raised an eyebrow, apparently amused by this unexpected development. "You've ruled for 2 million years," Marcus said, his voice growing steadier with each word. "You've seen species rise and fall. You've perfected the art of consuming other civilizations." "Indeed," Lord Kazeth replied. "And, now you understand your place in the natural order." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, I don't think I do. You see, there's something about humans that I don't think you understand. We're not just another species to be catalogued and consumed. Lord Kazetha's expression shifted slightly, the amused smile becoming something more predatory. And, what, pray tell, makes you so special? Marcus took another step forward, and he realized something that surprised him. He wasn't afraid anymore. Oh, he was terrified, his heart was racing, his palms were sweating, and every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run. But underneath the terror was something else, something that felt almost like excitement. We're stubborn, Marcus said simply. Lord Kazeth blinked, clearly not having expected that response. Stubborn? Ridiculously, impossibly, irrationally stubborn, Marcus continued, warming to his theme. When someone tells us we can't do something, we do it anyway. When someone says we're too weak, we get stronger. When someone tries to put us in our place. He smiled, and he could see his own reflection in Lord Kazetha's blood-red eyes. We refused to stay there. The corridor had gone completely silent. Even the other Vorthak warriors seemed to be listening, their perfect faces showing the first hints of uncertainty Marcus had seen. You know what the difference is between humans and every other species you've conquered? Marcus asked, taking yet another step forward. He was close enough now to see his own reflection in those terrible red eyes. Lord Kazetha's voice was softer now, but no less dangerous. Enlighten me. Every other species you faced probably begged, Marcus said. They probably tried to negotiate, or ran, or fought with whatever weapons they had. They probably acted exactly like you expected them to act. And humans are different how, exactly? Marcus smiled wider. We're the species that looked at the ocean and decided we belonged in it, even though we can't breathe water. We're the species that looked at the sky and decided we belonged there, even though we can't fly. We're the species that looked at the impossible distances between stars and decided that wasn't going to stop us either. Lord Kazetha's eyes narrowed. Your point? My point, Marcus said, stepping close enough that he could feel the unnatural cold radiating from the Vorthak Lord's skin, is that you just made a very big mistake. And what mistake is that? Marcus reached out slowly, deliberately, and placed his hand on Lord Kazetha's chest, right over where a human's heart would be. The Vorthak Lord's skin felt like ice, but Marcus didn't pull away. You told us we can't win, Marcus said softly. And now we absolutely have to prove you wrong. For a moment, Lord Kazeth just stared down at the small human hand resting against his chest. Then, he laughed, a sound that echoed through the corridor like breaking glass. Oh, my dear little creature, he purred, covering Marcus's hand with his own. His skin felt like touching a glacier. You have such spirit. I think I shall save you for last, so I can properly savor your despair when you watch your species burn. Marcus felt the pressure as Lord Kazetha's fingers began to tighten around his hand. The Vorthak Lord's strength was inhuman. Marcus could feel his bones beginning to creak under the pressure. I promise you this, Lord Kazeth whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from Marcus's. I will drink every drop of your blood. I will drain your life essence so slowly that you'll beg me to end your suffering. And, when I'm finished with you, I'll move on to your homeworld and do the same to every last member of your pathetic species. Marcus should have been terrified. The rational part of his mind was screaming at him to run, to fight, to do anything except stand there with his hand pressed against the chest of a creature that could probably tear him apart with its bare hands. Instead, he smiled. You promise? Marcus asked. Lord Kazeth blinked, clearly taken aback by the response. Yes. I promise. Good, Marcus said, his smile widening until it was almost manic. Because I promise you something too. And, what is that, little human? Marcus leaned closer, until his lips were almost touching Lord Kazetha's ear. You're going to regret making that promise. For the first time since the encounter began, Marcus saw something flicker in those blood-red eyes. Not fear, he doubted Lord Kazeth had felt fear in centuries. But, uncertainty. Doubt. The first crack in the perfect confidence of a creature that had ruled the galaxy for 2 million years. You're insane, Lord Kazeth whispered. Marcus pulled back to look into those red eyes again, his hand still resting against the Vorthak Lord's chest. Probably. But, you know what they say about humans and madness. What do they say? It's contagious. That's when the lights went out. The emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing the corridor in red light that made everyone look like they were covered in blood. In the confusion of that brief darkness, Marcus heard Dr. Voss scream. When his vision cleared, she was gone. Find her, Lord Kazeth ordered his warriors, but his eyes never left Marcus. And prepare the others for harvesting. It's time these humans learned what happens to species that refuse to know their place. Marcus stood alone in the corridor with Lord Kazeth and 2 remaining Vorthak warriors, his hand still pressed against the Lord's chest. He could feel something under his palm, not a heartbeat exactly, but something rhythmic, like the pulse of dark energy. You felt that, didn't you? Marcus asked softly. Lord Kazetha's expression shifted. Felt what? Marcus's smile turned predatory. The moment everything changed. Before Lord Kazeth could respond, Marcus pulled his hand away and stepped back. The Vorthak Lord's skin where Marcus had touched him was no longer pale white. There was a faint flush of color there, barely visible but definitely present. What did you do? Lord Kazeth demanded, staring down at his chest. I kept my promise, Marcus replied. I told you that you were going to regret threatening my species. Lord Kazeth looked up sharply. What are you talking about? Marcus was already backing away, but his voice carried clearly in the corridor. You want to know what makes humans special, Lord Kazeth? It's not our technology. It's not our weapons. It's not even our stubbornness, although that helps. Then, what? Marcus reached the end of the corridor and turned back one last time. We're the species that figures out how to weaponize everything. Even kindness. Then, he was gone, disappearing into the maze of corridors that made up the horizon's edge. Behind him, he could hear Lord Kazeth shouting orders to his warriors, demanding they find the human immediately. But Marcus wasn't running blindly. He had a plan now, born from years of studying alien biology and a flash of intuition that had hit him the moment he'd touched Lord Kazetha's skin. The Vorthak fed on blood, on life essence, on the biological energy of other species. They were predators perfectly adapted to their role, with bodies designed to process and store that stolen life force. But what happened when a predator tried to feed on something that was feeding on them in return? Marcus smiled as he ran through the darkened corridors, heading for the ship's medical bay. He had work to do, and not much time to do it. Behind him, Lord Kazeth stood in the red-lit corridor, staring at the spot where Marcus had touched him. The flush of color on his skin was growing larger, spreading outward like an infection. For the first time in 2 million years, a Vorthak Lord felt something he'd never experienced before, the nagging worry that perhaps he'd underestimated his prey. The hunt was about to begin. But Lord Kazeth was no longer entirely certain who was hunting whom. The medical bay of the horizon's edge had been designed to handle everything from routine checkups to major surgical procedures. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had always been proud of her domain, state-of-the-art equipment, comprehensive medical databases, and enough supplies to handle a crew of 200 for a year-long mission. She hadn't designed it to serve as a hiding place during an alien invasion, but desperate times called for creative solutions. Marcus found her crouched behind an overturned medical scanner, clutching a plasma scalpel in hands that shook so badly she could barely hold it. Her dark eyes were wide with terror, and when she saw him enter the medical bay, she nearly activated the scalpel before recognizing him. Marcus, she whispered. Where have you been? The whole ship is crawling with those things. Marcus held up his hands, showing he was unarmed, and moved slowly toward her hiding place. I've been having a conversation with their leader. Dr. Rodriguez, I need your help with something. A conversation? She stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Marcus, these creatures are systematically hunting down every human on this ship. They've already taken Captain Morrison, Dr. Voss, and half the crew. And you were having a conversation? Marcus nodded, dropping down beside her behind the scanner. A very illuminating conversation. Dr. Rodriguez, Elena, I think I know how to fight them. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Fight them? Marcus, did you see those things? They're not human. They're faster, stronger, and, apparently they can see in the dark better than we can. How exactly do you propose we fight beings that look like they stepped out of a nightmare? By being human, Marcus replied simply. Before Elena could ask what he meant, the lights in the medical bay flickered. Not a power fluctuation, something was interfering with the electrical systems. A moment later, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Not the hurried steps of fleeing humans, but something else. Something that walked with perfect, measured precision. He's found me, Marcus whispered, but he didn't sound afraid. He sounded almost excited. Who's found you? Elena hissed back. Lord Kazeth. The one I was talking to. Marcus peered around the edge of the scanner toward the medical bay entrance. Elena, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me even though it's going to sound completely insane. The footsteps were getting closer. Elena gripped her plasma scalpel tighter. What do you need? I need you to run a full medical scan on me. Right now. And I need you to pay special attention to my cellular regeneration rates. Elena stared at him. Your cellular regeneration rates? Marcus, this is hardly the time for a physical examination. It's exactly the time, Marcus insisted. Elena, please. I think I'm about to prove something very important about human biology, but I need baseline readings first. The footsteps stopped directly outside the medical bay. Elena could see a shadow under the door, tall, unnaturally still, as if whatever was out there was simply waiting. Run the scan, Marcus said urgently. Quick and dirty, just the basic cellular metrics. Elena's hands were shaking as she activated her medical scanner, pointing it at Marcus. The device hummed to life, running light patterns across his body. Data began scrolling across the small screen: heart rate, blood pressure, cellular activity levels, immune response indicators. Marcus, she whispered, staring at the readings. These numbers, they're wrong. Wrong how? Your cellular regeneration is off the charts. And your immune system. She looked up at him with wide eyes. Marcus, according to this, your immune system is working at about 300% of normal efficiency. Marcus nodded grimly. That's what I thought. Elena, listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens next, I need you to keep scanning. I need you to record everything. Before Elena could ask why, the doors to the medical bay slid open. Lord Kazeth stood in the doorway, backlit by the red emergency lighting in the corridor. He had changed since Marcus had last seen him. The pale perfection of his skin now showed clear signs of something. The spot where Marcus had touched him had spread, covering nearly a quarter of his chest with what looked almost like a rash. But it wasn't irritated or inflamed. If anything, the affected skin looked more alive than the rest of him. There you are, my fascinating little human, Lord Kazeth said, stepping into the medical bay. His voice held the same cultured tones as before, but there was something else underneath it now. Uncertainty? I've been looking forward to continuing our conversation. Marcus stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. Behind the scanner, Elena remained hidden, her medical scanner still running and recording everything. You look different, Marcus observed. How are you feeling, Lord Kazeth? The Vorthak Lord's red eyes narrowed. I feel curious. Do you know, in 2 million years of existence, I have never experienced anything quite like what you did to me? And what do you think I did to you? Lord Kazeth moved closer, his movements still graceful but less perfectly controlled than before. That is what I intend to find out. Before I drain you dry, of course. Marcus tilted his head, studying the spreading patch on Lord Kazeth's chest. Tell me, how long has it been since you felt truly alive? Alive? Lord Kazeth laughed, but the sound was less crystalline than before. I am immortal, little human. I have transcended the need for such crude concepts as alive or dead. That's not what I asked, Marcus replied calmly. I asked when you last felt alive. When did you last feel your heartbeat? When did you last feel genuine hunger, not just the mechanical need to feed? When did you last feel anything beyond cold calculation? Lord Kazeth stopped moving. For the first time since entering the medical bay, he looked uncertain. "You're trying to distract me," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus shook his head. "I'm trying to understand you. You see, I'm a xenobiologist. It's my job to study alien life forms. And you, Lord Kazeth, are the most fascinating alien life form I've ever encountered." "Fascinating how?" Marcus began moving slowly around the room, keeping just out of Lord Kazetha's reach. Behind them, Elena continued scanning, her device recording every detail of their interaction. "You're a perfect predator," Marcus explained. "Immortal, powerful, capable of draining the life force from other species and using it to sustain yourself. But there's a problem with being a perfect predator, isn't there?" Lord Kazeth followed Marcus's movements, but he was listening intently. "What problem?" "Perfection is static," Marcus said. "It doesn't grow, doesn't change, doesn't evolve. You've spent 2 million years being exactly the same thing, a creature that takes in, never gives anything back. And what would you have me give back?" Lord Kazeth asked, his voice carrying an edge of danger. Marcus stopped moving and faced him directly. "Life." "I beg your pardon?" Marcus smiled, the same manic grin he'd worn in the corridor earlier. "You feed on life energy, right? You consume the biological essence of other species to sustain your immortal existence. But what happens when you try to feed on something that's actively feeding you in return?" Lord Kazetha's eyes widened slightly. His hand moved instinctively to his chest, where the strange patch continued to spread. "What did you do to me?" he demanded. "I gave you what you've been missing for 2 million years, Marcus replied. "I gave you life. Real, messy, complicated, gloriously imperfect human life." Behind the scanner, Elena watched her medical readings with growing amazement. The scanner was picking up 2 distinct life signs in the room now, Marcus's elevated human readings, and something else. Something that was registering as increasingly human with each passing moment. "That's impossible," Lord Kazeth said, but his voice lacked his earlier confidence. "Is it?" Marcus asked. "You're a creature that survives by absorbing biological energy from other species. But humans are different, aren't we? We don't just give, we share. We form connections. We create bonds that work both ways." Lord Kazeth took a step backward. "You're suggesting that when I touched you, I didn't just become a potential food source," Marcus finished. "I became part of your biology. And you became part of mine." To demonstrate his point, Marcus rolled up his sleeve. His arm showed clear signs of change, his skin was paler than normal, and his veins stood out more prominently. But, instead of looking sickly, he looked more vital, more alive than Elena had ever seen him. "My cellular regeneration has tripled," Marcus explained calmly. "My immune system is working at superhuman levels. My reflexes are faster, my mind is clearer, and I feel like I could run a marathon without getting tired." Lord Kazeth stared at him in horror. "But that would mean that you're becoming more human with every passing minute," Marcus confirmed. "How does it feel, Lord Kazeth? When was the last time you felt your heart beat this strongly?" As if summoned by his words, Lord Kazeth pressed his hand to his chest. Elena could see on her scanner that his heart rate, something that had barely registered before, was now clearly visible. Strong, steady, and unmistakably alive. "This is unacceptable," Lord Kazeth snarled, but even his anger seemed more vibrant, more genuine than before. "I will not be reduced to some mewling human creature." "You're not being reduced to anything," Marcus said gently. "You're being expanded into something more." Lord Kazeth raised his hand, and energy began crackling around his fingers. The same dark power that had torn through the Horizon's Edge's hull was gathering in his palm, ready to tear Marcus apart. But then, something strange happened. The energy flickered, became unstable, and, suddenly, shifted from dark red to a warm golden color. "What?" Lord Kazeth stared at his own hand in shock. "Your magic is changing too," Marcus observed with scientific fascination. "Instead of drawing energy from others, you're generating it yourself. Instead of taking life, you're creating it." The golden energy around Lord Kazetha's hand pulsed once and then dissipated entirely. He looked at his palm as if it belonged to someone else. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Marcus stepped closer, and Lord Kazeth didn't move to stop him. "Because humans don't just survive, Lord Kazeth. We adapt. We change. We make everything around us change too. And, when you tried to claim me as prey, you accidentally invited humanity into your very essence." Elena watched from behind the scanner as Marcus reached out again, this time placing both hands on Lord Kazeth's chest. The Vorthak Lord, who could have snapped Marcus in half without effort, simply stood there and let it happen. "The question is," Marcus said softly, "what are you going to do about it?" Lord Kazeth looked down at the human touching him. His red eyes were still alien, still dangerous, but there was something new in them now. Something vulnerable. "I don't know," he admitted, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. "Well," Marcus said with a gentle smile, "welcome to being human. Not knowing what comes next is kind of our thing." Behind them, Elena's scanner chimed softly. She looked down at the readings and gasped. The two life signs on her device were no longer separate. They were intertwined, connected, feeding energy back and forth in a complex pattern that reminded her of symbiosis, she whispered. Both Marcus and Lord Kazeth turned toward the sound of her voice. Elena stood up slowly, her scanner still in her hands. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, "but I've been recording everything, and the readings. Marcus, what you've created isn't parasitism or infection. It's true biological symbiosis. You're both becoming something new." Lord Kazeth stared at her, then at Marcus. "Both of us?" Marcus nodded. "I told you that humans weaponize everything. Even evolution." "But, my people," Lord Kazeth said desperately. "The Empire. 2 million years of civilization. Doesn't have to end," Marcus replied. "It just has to change." Lord Kazeth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Elena had heard it yet. "The others," he said. "My warriors throughout the ship. If this, symbiosis, is spreading through our psychic network, are they changing too?" Marcus asked. Lord Kazeth nodded slowly. "I can feel them. Confusion. Fear. And something else. Something they've never felt before." "What?" Lord Kazeth looked at Marcus with something that might have been wonder. "Hope." That's when the lights came back on. The medical bay's full lighting revealed just how much both Marcus and Lord Kazeth had changed. Marcus looked like a healthier, more vital version of himself, while Lord Kazeth's perfect pale features now showed hints of natural color and expression. But, more importantly, they could hear sounds from throughout the ship. Not the sounds of battle or hunting, but something else. Voices. Conversation. The hesitant beginnings of communication. "Your crew," Lord Kazeth said, listening to the sounds. "They're talking to my warriors." Marcus grinned. "See? I told you it was contagious." Elena looked between the two of them, her scientific mind racing to process what she was witnessing. "Marcus, do you realize what you've done? You've just triggered the first documented case of beneficial cross-species symbiosis between sentient life forms. The implications for xenobiology are staggering. The implications for the galaxy are even more staggering," Marcus replied. "Lord Kazeth, what happens when your empire realizes that instead of conquering humanity, they've accidentally formed the first interspecies symbiotic bond in galactic history?" Lord Kazeth was quiet for a moment, his enhanced human emotions clearly struggling to process the magnitude of what was happening. "I believe," he said slowly, "that we are about to find out." That's when the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Lord Kazeth," came a voice speaking in the musical language of the Vorthak. "This is Commander Vex. We have a situation." Lord Kazeth moved to the communication panel, Marcus staying close beside him. Elena noticed that neither of them seemed to think it was strange anymore. "Report, Commander," Lord Kazeth replied in the same alien language, though Elena's universal translator was picking up the conversation. "My lord, the humans, they're not reacting as expected. When we attempt to drain them, something flows back. My warriors are reporting changes. And, my lord, the human called Morrison wishes to speak with you. Marcus looked surprised. Captain Morrison is still alive? Lord Kazeth nodded. It seems your captain is having a similar effect on my commander Vex. He activated the communication system. Put the human Morrison through. A moment later, Captain Morrison's familiar voice filled the medical bay. Lord Kazeth? This is Captain Morrison of the Horizon's Edge. I believe we need to discuss terms. Terms? Lord Kazeth replied, though he didn't sound surprised. Terms for the most unprecedented first contact in galactic history, Morrison continued. Because unless I'm very much mistaken, your people and mine just accidentally discovered something that's going to change everything. Marcus looked at Lord Kazeth with a satisfied expression. I told you we were stubborn. Lord Kazeth shook his head, but Elena could see he was fighting back something that looked suspiciously like a smile. You told me many things, Marcus Chen. But I don't believe you mentioned that your species was capable of accidentally conquering their conquerors. Did I not mention that? Marcus asked innocently. Ha! Must have slipped my mind. Elena watched the exchange between them and realized something profound was happening. Not just biological symbiosis, but something deeper. The beginning of genuine friendship between two species that had started this encounter as predator and prey. Outside the medical bay, the sounds of tentative communication continued to grow louder. Humans and Vorthak were talking, sharing, beginning to understand each other not as enemies or food sources, but as something entirely new. So, Marcus said to Lord Kazeth, ready to find out what comes next? Lord Kazeth looked at his hands, where golden energy was beginning to dance around his fingers again, not the dark power of a predator, but something warm and creative and alive. No, he said honestly. But I find myself looking forward to discovering it anyway. Marcus grinned. Now you're getting it. Welcome to being human, Lord Kazeth. And, welcome to being something more than human, Marcus Chen, Lord Kazeth replied. Elena looked at her scanner one more time. The reading showed two beings that were no longer quite human and no longer quite Vorthak, but something new. Something that had never existed before in all the galaxy's long history. Something that was going to change everything. The ship's main conference room had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Captain Morrison sat at the head of the table, looking remarkably composed for someone who had supposedly been captured by alien invaders an hour earlier. To his right sat Commander Vex, a Vorthak warrior whose pale features now showed distinct signs of the same transformation that had affected Lord Kazeth. The commander's blood-red eyes had developed flecks of warm brown, and, when she spoke, her voice carried an almost human warmth. Around the table, the scene was repeated over and over, humans and Vorthak sitting together, their very presence seeming to create ripples of change that affected everyone in the room. Dr. Sarah Voss was deep in animated conversation with a Vorthak scientist whose silver hair had begun developing streaks of blonde. Chief Engineer Park was examining a piece of Vorthak technology alongside its creator, both of them clearly fascinated by how their different approaches to the same problem were beginning to merge. Marcus entered the conference room with Lord Kazeth at his side, followed by Elena, who was still clutching her scanner and trying to record everything she could. The changes in the room's atmosphere were immediately apparent. What should have been a tense standoff between captor and captive had become something that looked more like a scientific symposium. Ah, Marcus, Captain Morrison called out, looking up from his conversation with Commander Vex. Glad you could join us. Lord Kazeth, I trust you're feeling well? Lord Kazeth moved to take a seat across from Morrison, and Marcus found himself automatically taking the chair beside him. I am feeling many things, Captain Morrison. Most of them unfamiliar. I can imagine, Morrison replied with a slight smile. Commander Vex has been explaining Vorthak society to me. 2 million years of perfect stability, unchanging hierarchy, immortal beings who never questioned their role in the universe. It must be quite a shock to suddenly find yourselves evolving. Commander Vex nodded, her transformed features showing an expression that would have been impossible for a pure-blood Vorthak. The neural networks that connect our people are resonating with new patterns. Warriors across the ship are reporting experiences they have no words for: curiosity, empathy, the desire to create rather than merely consume. Elena looked up from her scanner. Captain, the biological changes are accelerating. Every human in this room shows enhanced physical capabilities, improved healing rates, and dramatically strengthened immune systems. But the Vortak are experiencing even more radical changes. She gestured toward Commander Vex. Their cellular structure is becoming more flexible, more adaptable. Their energy manipulation abilities are shifting from predatory draining to something that looks like genuine creation of life force. Lord Kazeth raised his hand, and the golden energy that Marcus had first seen in the medical bay flickered around his fingers. But now it was more controlled, more refined. As they watched, he shaped it into a small, glowing flower that pulsed with warm light. Yesterday I could drain the life from 100 creatures without effort, he said quietly. Today, I find myself able to create life where none existed before. Dr. Voss looked up from her conversation with the Vortak scientist. The same thing is happening throughout the ship. We're not just changing individually, we're changing each other just by being in proximity. Marcus leaned forward, his scientific mind fully engaged. It's not just symbiosis anymore. It's become genuine evolution in real time. The question is, how far will it spread? Commander Vex and Lord Kazeth exchanged a look that carried depths of communication invisible to purely human eyes. After a moment, Lord Kazeth spoke. The Vortak Empire consists of 47 battle fleets, each containing approximately 50 vessels. Our psychic network spans the galaxy, connecting every Vortak mind to the collective consciousness of our people. Captain Morrison raised an eyebrow. Are you saying that whatever happened here is spreading to your entire civilization? That is precisely what we are saying, Commander Vex confirmed. Even now, reports are coming in from ships across the galaxy. Confusion, disorientation, and an overwhelming desire to seek out other species, not to harvest them, but to understand them. Marcus felt a chill of excitement run down his spine. You mean we've accidentally triggered galaxy-wide evolution among the most powerful military force in known space? Lord Kazeth nodded slowly. It appears that your species' talent for weaponizing everything extends to evolutionary biology itself. Elena's scanner chimed again, drawing everyone's attention. She stared at the readings with wide eyes. What is it? Morrison asked. The energy patterns, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not just spreading through proximity anymore. They're propagating through quantum entanglement. Every time two of our people interact, it creates a resonance effect that strengthens the bond for everyone connected to them. She looked up at the room full of humans and Vortak. Do you understand what this means? We're not just witnessing evolution, we're actively catalyzing it. The more we interact, the faster the change spreads, and the stronger the effect becomes. Dr. Voss stood up excitedly. It's like a biological chain reaction. Each new bond makes the next one easier to form, more powerful, more permanent. The Vortak scientist she'd been talking with, who was now sporting distinctly human features around his eyes, nodded enthusiastically. Among my people, we call this the Great Awakening. Not because we were sleeping, but because we were limited. Constrained by our own perfection. Marcus looked around the room and realized something profound was happening. The distinctions between human and Vortak were becoming increasingly meaningless. Not because one species was becoming the other, but because both were becoming something entirely new. Lord Kazeth, he said, what happens when this reaches the rest of your empire? When 2 million years of unchanging civilization suddenly discovers the ability to grow? Lord Kazeth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested he was considering implications far beyond their current situation. Throughout our history, we have encountered thousands of species. Some we harvested immediately. Others we studied, learned from, and then harvested. A few we kept as subjects for ongoing experimentation. He paused, his transformed features showing an expression of what Marcus realized was regret. In all that time, we never considered that any species might have something to offer us that we couldn't simply take by force. We never imagined that contact with another species might make us more than we were. Commander Vex picked up the thought. But, now, Vortac ships across the galaxy are seeking out the species we once hunted. Not to harvest them, but, to... She struggled with concepts that had no equivalent in her original language. To share with them. To learn from them. To become partners in whatever we are becoming. Captain Morrison leaned back in his chair, the magnitude of the situation clearly weighing on him. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The most powerful military force in the galaxy has just discovered empathy, and they're actively spreading it to every species they encounter? That is a somewhat simplified but accurate assessment, Lord Kazeth confirmed. And this all started because Marcus here decided to be stubborn about being conquered? Marcus grinned sheepishly. I may have been showing off a little bit. Elena actually laughed, despite everything they'd been through. Marcus, you didn't just save humanity. You accidentally triggered the end of galactic warfare as we know it. Well, Marcus said thoughtfully, we humans have always been overachievers. That's when the ship's communication system crackled to life again. This time, the voice that came through spoke in a language none of them recognized, though the universal translators quickly provided subtitles. Attention unknown vessels. This is the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. We have detected unauthorized entry into our system. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction. Captain Morrison stood up. The Zephyrians. We're in their territory, I forgot with everything that's been happening. Lord Kazeth also stood, but there was something different about his posture now. Gone was the predatory grace of a hunter. Instead, he moved with the purposeful stride of someone with important work to do. Captain Morrison, with your permission, I would like to handle this communication. Morrison looked surprised. You want to negotiate with them? Lord Kazeth, the Zephyrians are known to shoot first and ask questions later. Precisely why they need to be the next species to experience what we have discovered, Lord Kazeth replied. He moved to the communication panel, but turned back to address the room. What we have learned here today cannot be contained to just humans and Vortac. The galaxy is vast, filled with species that have been isolated by fear, aggression, and the assumption that contact with others means conflict. Marcus joined him at the communication panel. You're talking about active intervention. Going out and deliberately spreading the symbiosis to other species. I am talking about fulfilling the promise I made to you, Lord Kazeth said with a smile that was becoming increasingly human. I promised to take your blood. But what I have taken is something far more precious. I have taken your hope, your curiosity, your irrepressible desire to make everything better. He activated the communication system, his voice now carrying both the authority of a Vortac lord and the warmth of human emotion. Zephyrian Defense Fleet, this is Lord Kazeth of the Vortac Empire aboard the human vessel Horizon's Edge. We request permission to approach your world not as conquerors or invaders, but as beings who have discovered something that will change the nature of existence itself. The response came back immediately, sharp and suspicious. Vortac presence in our system is an act of war. You have 30 seconds to withdraw or we will open fire. Lord Kazeth looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. We understand your fear, Lord Kazeth continued. For 2 million years, my people have been a source of terror throughout this galaxy. We have taken without giving, consumed without creating, conquered without offering anything in return. But, today, we have learned that there is another way. 20 seconds, Vortac. Marcus stepped up to the microphone. Zephyrian Fleet, this is Dr. Marcus Chen of Earth. What Lord Kazeth is trying to tell you is that we've accidentally discovered something that makes the old pattern of conflict obsolete. We're not here to fight you. We're here to offer you something that no species in galactic history has ever been offered, the chance to become more than you ever imagined possible. There was a long pause. When the Zephyrian voice returned, it carried a note of uncertainty. Explain. Marcus looked around the conference room at humans and Vortac working together, creating together, becoming something new together. We're offering you evolution, he said simply. Not conquest, not submission, not domination. Evolution. The chance to grow beyond what you are, while still remaining who you are. The chance to discover that contact with other species doesn't have to mean conflict, it can mean transformation. Another pause. Then, this is Commander Thale of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Lord Kazeth, we have monitored Vortak activities for centuries. What you propose is impossible. Your species does not form alliances. You consume. Lord Kazeth smiled, and the expression was now fully human while remaining unmistakably his own. Commander Thale, my species does not form alliances. But, I am no longer purely my species. None of us are. He gestured to Commander Vex, who stepped forward to add her voice to the conversation. Commander Thale, this is Commander Vex. 3 hours ago, I would have agreed with your assessment of the Vortak Empire. But, 3 hours ago, I had never experienced curiosity about another being's thoughts rather than hunger for their life force. I had never felt the desire to create something beautiful rather than destroy something functional. I had never wondered what it would be like to be part of something larger than myself. What you're describing is impossible, Commander Thale replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. Marcus stepped back up to the microphone. Commander Thale, 6 months ago, humans thought faster than light travel was impossible. A year before that, we thought meaningful communication with alien species was impossible. This morning, I thought that turning galactic conquerors into partners was impossible. He paused, looking at Lord Kazeth with genuine affection. But, here's the thing about impossible things, Commander. They only stay impossible until someone stubborn enough refuses to accept that they can't be done. Elena looked up from her scanner, her eyes wide with excitement. Marcus, the quantum resonance patterns are extending beyond the ship. The symbiosis is trying to establish connections with the Zephyrian fleet just through proximity communication. Marcus grinned. Commander Thale, you might want to check your crew's vital signs. I think you're about to have a very interesting conversation with your medical officer. The pause this time stretched for almost a minute. When Commander Thale's voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been wonder. How is this possible? It's possible, Lord Kazeth said gently, because the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any of us realized. Commander Thale, we would like to request permission to come aboard one of your ships. Not to conquer, not to harvest, but to show you what we've discovered. And what have you discovered? Marcus and Lord Kazeth looked at each other, then at the room full of humans and Vortak who were no longer quite either, but something new and beautiful and impossible. We've discovered, Marcus said, that the greatest weapon in the universe isn't a gun or a bomb or a death ray. It's the willingness to reach out to someone different from yourself and say, let's see what we can become together. Commander Thale was quiet for a long moment. Then, Lord Kazeth, Dr. Chen, you have permission to approach. But, I warn you, if this is some elaborate deception. It's not a deception, Commander, Lord Kazeth said softly. It's a revolution. And, you're about to become part of it. As the communication ended, Marcus looked around the conference room one more time. Humans and Vortak, former enemies and former prey, working together toward something that none of them could have imagined just hours before. You know, he said to Lord Kazeth, when I woke up this morning, I thought I was just going to analyze some soil samples. Lord Kazeth's laugh was rich and warm and entirely human while being completely his own. And, when I woke up this morning, I thought I was going to harvest another insignificant species. Marcus grinned. Shows what we know. Indeed, Lord Kazeth agreed. Though I suspect our education is just beginning. Outside the ship, the Zephyrian fleet waited 47 ships filled with beings who had no idea that their entire understanding of the universe was about to change. Marcus looked forward to the conversation. The Zephyrian flagship Stellar Crown was a marvel of defensive engineering, thick armor plating, redundant shield generators, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. It had been built by a species that had spent the last 3,000 years perfecting the art of survival in a hostile galaxy, and every surface reflected that paranoid attention to detail. None of which had prepared it for what was currently happening in its main conference chamber. Commander Thale stood at the head of the room, staring at his hands with an expression of complete bewilderment. Like all Zephyrians, he was tall and lean, with iridescent blue skin and large eyes adapted for seeing in multiple light spectrums. But those eyes, normally a deep violet, were now shot through with streaks of warm gold. This is not possible, he said for the fourth time in the past hour, but his voice lacked conviction. Around him, his senior staff were experiencing their own transformations. Commander Yila's normally rigid posture had relaxed into something more human-like, while Science Officer Kren was actually smiling, an expression that had never appeared on a pure Zephyrian face. Marcus sat across from them, looking remarkably at ease for someone aboard a ship that had been pointing weapons at him an hour earlier. Lord Kazeth was beside him, and the changes in the Vorthak Lord were even more dramatic than before. His pale skin now had a healthy flush, his silver hair showed streaks of brown, and, when he moved, it was with a fluid grace that combined Vorthak elegance with distinctly human energy. "Commander Thale," Marcus said gently, "you've asked that question several times now. Perhaps instead of focusing on whether it's possible, we should talk about what it means." Elena sat nearby, her medical scanner working overtime to document the changes occurring in real time. The readings were extraordinary: 3 different species undergoing simultaneous evolution, their biological and quantum signatures interweaving in patterns of incredible complexity. "What it means," Commander Thale said, still staring at his transformed hands, "is that everything I've ever believed about the nature of existence is wrong." Lord Kazeth leaned forward, his expression compassionate in a way that would have been impossible before his change. "Not wrong, Commander. Simply incomplete." "Incomplete?" Science Officer Kren looked up from where he'd been examining his own transformed features in a reflective surface. "My lord, we've spent millennia perfecting our understanding of biology, physics, and social structures. Our civilization has achieved levels of technological and cultural sophistication that we believed represented the pinnacle of possible development." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And they probably do represent the pinnacle of development for a purely Zephyrian civilization. But what happens when you're no longer purely Zephyrian?" Commander Yila, who had been quietly observing the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "I can feel them." Everyone turned to look at her. The Zephyrian commander's normally stoic expression had softened into something approaching wonder. "Feel who?" Elena asked, her scanner picking up unusual energy patterns emanating from Commander Yila. "My crew," she whispered. "All of them. Not just their presence or their thoughts, I can feel what they're feeling. Their confusion, their fear, their excitement as they discover new capabilities they never knew they possessed." Lord Kazeth nodded in understanding. "The connection spreads. Every interaction strengthens the bond, not just between individuals, but between entire groups." Marcus stood and moved to one of the chamber's viewports. Outside, he could see both the horizon's edge and several Vorthak vessels. But, beyond them, something extraordinary was happening. Ships from a dozen different species were arriving in the system, not as invaders or refugees, but as beings drawn by something they couldn't quite identify. "Elena," Marcus said, "are you getting readings from those other ships?" She nodded, her eyes wide with amazement. "Marcus, the quantum resonance patterns are extending beyond our immediate group. Every ship that comes within a certain range begins showing similar transformation signatures." Commander Thale moved to join Marcus at the viewport. "Those are Corvanian traders, Elithic explorers, and is that a Hegemon science vessel?" "Word is spreading," Lord Kazeth confirmed. "Across the galaxy, species that have spent centuries or millennia avoiding contact with others are suddenly compelled to seek each other out." Marcus turned from the viewport to address the room. "We're not just witnessing evolution anymore. We're catalyzing the end of galactic isolationism." Science Officer Kren looked up from a datapad he'd been consulting. "The implications are staggering. If this effect continues to spread, within weeks every major civilization in the galaxy will be connected by these symbiotic bonds." "What kind of changes are we talking about?" Commander Thale asked, though Marcus noticed he seemed more curious than concerned now. Elena consulted her scanner. "Based on what we've observed so far, each species retains its core identity while gaining beneficial traits from every other species it bonds with. Humans are developing enhanced physical capabilities and extended lifespans. Vorthak are gaining creativity and emotional depth they've never experienced. And you, Commander Thale, are developing enhanced empathic abilities that allow you to understand and connect with other beings on levels your species has never achieved." Lord Kazeth stood and moved to a wall display showing the tactical situation around their small fleet. But, instead of military formations, the screen now showed patterns of energy exchange between ships, a complex web of connections that grew stronger and more intricate with each passing hour. "There is something else," he said quietly. "Something that goes beyond individual or even species-level transformation." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. Lord Kazeth manipulated the display, zooming out to show a larger section of the galaxy. Points of light, some steady, others pulsing, were scattered throughout the visible region. Each of these points represents a location where the symbiotic bonding has taken root. As the network grows, we're beginning to detect something unprecedented. He highlighted several clusters of light. These aren't just random transformation events. They're forming patterns. Structures. As if the galaxy itself is developing a form of collective consciousness. The room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. Commander Yila was the first to speak. "You're suggesting that we're not just evolving as individuals or even as species. You're suggesting that the galaxy itself is becoming aware." "I'm suggesting," Lord Kazeth replied carefully, "that consciousness may be an emergent property of sufficient complexity and connection. And that we may be witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in universal history." Marcus felt a chill of excitement run down his spine. A galactic mind. Not controlling or directing, but aware. Conscious. Capable of growth and learning and love, Elena said softly, looking up from her scanner. "Marcus, the energy patterns I'm detecting aren't just biological or quantum mechanical. They're carrying emotional resonances. The connections being formed between species aren't just functional, they're affectionate." Science Officer Kren laughed, a sound that no pure Zephyrian had ever made. "We're falling in love with each other. All of us. Every species, every individual, every world." Commander Thale shook his head in amazement. 3 hours ago, I was prepared to destroy you all to protect my people. Now I find myself caring about the welfare of beings I'd never met, feeling concern for species I'd never heard of." Marcus grinned. "Welcome to humanity's secret weapon, Commander. We don't just survive, we make friends. And, once you're friends with a human, you become friends with everyone the human is friends with." "But, it's not just humans anymore," Lord Kazeth observed. "Every species in the network is developing this trait. The ability to form genuine emotional bonds across biological and cultural barriers." The ship's communication system chimed, interrupting their conversation. Commander Thale activated it, and a familiar voice filled the chamber. "This is Captain Morrison aboard the Horizon's Edge. We're receiving communications from across the sector. Ships from the Andromedan Republic, the Crystalline Collective, the Void Wanderers, species that haven't spoken to outsiders in centuries, are actively seeking contact." Another voice joined the communication, Commander Vex from the Vorthak fleet. "My lord, reports are coming in from across our empire. Fleet commanders who have spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest are requesting permission to establish cultural exchange programs with their former target species." Marcus looked around the room at the transformed faces, Zephyrian, Vorthak, and human features blending in patterns that should have been impossible but felt completely natural. "It's not stopping," he said with something approaching awe. "The effect isn't just spreading, it's accelerating. Every new connection makes the next one easier, faster, more profound." Elena stood up suddenly, her scanner chiming with urgent alerts. "Marcus, you need to see this." She turned her device so everyone could see the display. The screen showed a real-time map of transformation events across their local region of the galaxy. But what had been scattered points of light just hours before was now a vast network of interconnected energy patterns. "It's not just our galaxy," she said breathlessly. "I'm detecting resonance patterns from other galaxies. Andromeda, the Magellanic Clouds, even some signals that appear to be coming from galaxies millions of light-years away." Lord Kazeth stared at the display in stunned silence. "The network is spanning intergalactic distances. How is that possible?" Commander Thale asked. Marcus smiled, but his expression was thoughtful rather than triumphant. "Because consciousness doesn't obey the normal rules of space and time. Once you create a truly connected network of aware beings, distance becomes irrelevant. Science Officer Kren was frantically working at a data terminal, cross-referencing their local readings with long-range sensor data. I'm detecting responses to our network from civilizations we've never even known existed. Species so ancient or so advanced that they exist outside our normal understanding of reality. They're waking up, Elena whispered. Beings that have been dormant for millions of years, civilizations that transcended physical existence eons ago, they're all responding to what we've created. Marcus moved back to the viewport, looking out at the growing collection of ships from dozens of different species. But now he was seeing something else. Space itself seemed to shimmer with barely visible energies, patterns of connection that extended far beyond the visible fleet. Lord Kazeth, he said softly, remember when you promised to take my blood? The Vorthak Lord joined him at the viewport. I remember. Did you ever imagine it would lead to this? Lord Kazeth was quiet for a moment, watching the impossible dance of energies that surrounded their small corner of the universe. When I made that promise, I believed I understood the nature of power. I thought strength meant the ability to take what you wanted from others. He turned to look at Marcus, his transformed features showing an expression of genuine humility. I never imagined that true power might come from giving something of yourself to others. Or that the greatest strength in the universe might be the willingness to become vulnerable. Commander Thale approached them, his own transformed features reflecting the wonder they all felt. What happens now? Where does this lead? Marcus looked around the room at beings who had been strangers or enemies just hours before and were now something approaching family. I honestly don't know, he admitted. But, for the first time in my life, I'm not worried about not knowing what comes next. Elena laughed, her scanner now showing energy patterns so complex that it had given up trying to display them in any conventional format. Marcus, you do realize what you've done, don't you? Saved the galaxy from eternal warfare? Much better than that, she replied with a grin. You've given the universe a reason to hope. Outside the viewport, the collection of ships from across the galaxy continued to grow. But Marcus was beginning to understand that what they were seeing wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The galaxy was waking up. And, for the first time in cosmic history, it was waking up with the capacity to love. Lord Kazeth placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that would have been impossible before their transformation, but now felt as natural as breathing. Thank you, he said simply. Marcus grinned. For what? For keeping your promise. What promise? Lord Kazetha's smile was radiant with genuine joy. You promised that I would regret threatening your species. And, you were right, I do regret it. Because if I hadn't made that threat, I never would have discovered what it means to be truly alive. Marcus looked out at the impossible vista of connected civilizations, at the shimmer of consciousness that was spreading across the cosmos, at the beginning of something that no being in galactic history had ever dared to imagine. Yeah, he said softly. I guess sometimes the best promises are the ones that come true in ways you never expected. The galaxy pulsed with new awareness, and, somewhere in the depths of space, ancient beings that had slumbered for eons began to stir, drawn by the call of connection, growth, and the radical possibility that existence could be about more than mere survival. The age of isolation was ending. The age of unity was about to begin. 6 months after what historians would later call the Great Awakening, Marcus Chin stood on the observation deck of the Unity Station, a massive space habitat constructed jointly by 47 different species in a time frame that defied every known principle of galactic engineering. The station itself was a marvel that reflected its creators. Sleek Vorthak architecture blended seamlessly with the crystalline geometries favored by the Zephyrians, while human engineering practicality merged with the flowing organic designs of species whose names Marcus had only learned weeks before. Every surface hummed with the combined life energies of its inhabitants, not stolen or harvested, but freely shared in an endless cycle of mutual enhancement. Through the vast transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see the impossible sight that greeted him every morning. A fleet of over 10,000 ships representing every major civilization in the known galaxy, and many that had been unknown until they'd answered the call of the growing consciousness network. But today was special. Today, they were expecting visitors. Marcus, came a familiar voice behind him. He turned to see Lord Kazeth approaching, though the being who had once terrorized the galaxy was now barely recognizable. The pale perfection had been replaced by vibrant health, his silver hair now showed the colors of a dozen different species, and his eyes, once blood red, now contained swirls of every conceivable hue. More remarkably, floating beside him was a small construct of pure energy, something that looked like a cross between a flower and a butterfly, pulsing with gentle light. It was one of the new life forms that Kazeth had learned to create, beings of pure consciousness that existed to explore, learn, and share beauty with anyone they encountered. "Any word from the Deep Scouts?" Marcus asked. Kazeth nodded, his expression mixing excitement with something approaching reverence. "They've made contact. The first ones are coming." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. The first ones, being so ancient that they predated the formation of most galaxies, so advanced that they existed primarily as patterns of pure thought spread across cosmic distances. According to the records of the oldest civilizations, they had withdrawn from normal spacetime billions of years ago, ascending to levels of existence that made them effectively gods. But the Great Awakening had reached even them, drawing their attention back to the physical universe for the first time in eons. "When?" Marcus asked. "Within the hour," Kazeth replied. "Elena estimates their arrival will trigger consciousness resonances across multiple galactic clusters." Marcus grinned. "So, no pressure." The energy construct floating beside Kazeth pulsed with what Marcus had learned to interpret as laughter. The little beings, which Kazeth called sparks, had become unofficial ambassadors between species, their pure joy and curiosity making them instant favorites wherever they went. "Where's Elena now?" Marcus asked. "In the central resonance chamber with the council," Kazeth replied. "They're preparing the station's consciousness matrix to handle entities of first one magnitude." Marcus nodded and began walking toward the center of the station, Kazeth and his spark companion falling into step beside him. The corridors they passed through were unlike anything that had existed before the awakening, walls that shifted color to reflect the emotional states of their inhabitants, floors that provided gentle resistance training for species that needed it, and atmosphere that automatically adjusted to provide optimal conditions for whatever beings happened to be present. More importantly, the corridors were filled with life. Humans chatted animatedly with Vortak philosophers about the nature of creativity. Zephyrian engineers collaborated with Corvanian artists on projects that merged science and beauty in impossible ways. Children from a dozen species played games that involved manipulating gravity and light as naturally as human children might play with blocks. "You know," Marcus said as they walked, "when I first touched you on that ship, I never imagined it would lead to this." Kazeth smiled, an expression that now came as naturally as breathing. "When you touched me, I thought you were simply a brave fool facing inevitable death. I never imagined that your species' greatest strength would turn out to be your ability to make friends with anything." They passed through a section where the walls were transparent, providing a view of the station's agricultural levels. Instead of traditional farming, the space was filled with gardens that existed as much for beauty as nutrition, collaborative artworks where different species had contributed their unique understanding of life and growth to create something unprecedented. Floating through the gardens were more of Kazetha's sparks, but also other new life forms.